There's a thought experiment most people avoid. Imagine waking up tomorrow knowing that everything you do, every choice you make, every word you speak you will repeat infinitely. This time in life's the same mistakes, the same joys and sorrows. Not as punishment, not as a reward, simply as existence itself, looping forever without variation, without escape. Most people recoil from this idea, but Friedrich Nietzsche asked, what if you loved it? What if you desired nothing more than to live this exact life again and again for eternity? He called this eternal recurrence, and buried within it is something far more dangerous than philosophy. It's a test of whether you reliving like a mortal or thinking like a god. Nietzsche didn't write like other philosophers. He didn't build systems or logical proofs. He wrote like a prophet descended from mountains, like someone who had seen something the rest of humanity refused to see. His books read like fever dreams, full of aphorisms that sound like riddles, declarations that feel like accusations. But beneath the poetry and provocation lies a singular obsession. How does a human being transcend the smallness of human thinking? How do you escape the herd, the comfort of borrowed meaning, the safety of other people's truths? How do you become what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, not a superhuman in body, but in mind, in spirit, and the sheer audacity of self-creation? Most people never ask that question. They inherit their values. They adopt the beliefs of their culture, their parents, their era, and call it truth. They live in what Nietzsche described as a kind of spiritual sleep, never realizing that the entire framework of their existence, their morality, their meaning, their sense of right and wrong was constructed by others. And here's the disturbing part. Those others might have been wrong, or worse, those values might have been designed not to liberate you, but to control you, to make you obedient, to make you weak. Nietzsche saw this everywhere, in religion, in politics, in philosophy itself. He looked at Christianity and saw not divine truth, but a system engineered to glorify suffering, to make weakness a virtue, to convince the powerless that their submission was noble. He called it slave morality, morality invented by those who couldn't dominate life. So instead, they rewrote the rules to make domination seem evil. Meekness became righteousness. Poverty became purity. Suffering became sacred, and anyone who celebrated strength, ambition, or vitality was condemned as sinful. Nietzsche didn't see compassion in this. He saw resentment, a deep, festering hatred of life itself, dressed up as holiness. But he didn't stop at religion. He turned that same brutal gaze on secular ideologies, on nationalism, on the comforting lies people tell themselves about progress and justice and the arc of history. He saw people clinging to grand narratives because the alternative was unbearable. The possibility that existence has no inherent meaning, that there is no cosmic plan, that you are not here for a reason, that the universe doesn't care about you, will never care about you, and any meaning you find in life, you will have to create yourself. This is where most philosophy flinches. It offers answers, systems, consolations. Nietzsche offers nothing but a mirror and a challenge. If there is no God, if there is no universal morality, if existence is simply a blind, indifferent process, what do? Do you collapse into nihilism, into despair, into the quiet suicide of going through the motions? Or do you do something far more frightening? You take responsibility for creating your own values, your own meaning, your own purpose, without the safety net of divine approval or cosmic validation. This is what it means to think like a god, not to pray to one, not to serve one, but to realize that the power you've been outsourcing to heaven, to society, to authority, that power was always yours. The power to decide what is valuable, the power to determine what is worth living for, the power to say yes to existence on your own terms, not because it was handed to you, but because you forged it in the furnace of your own will. Nietzsche believed most people would never do this. They would cling to their inherited meanings, their comfortable illusions, their herd mentalities. They would resent anyone who dared to live differently, who refused to bow to their gods or their moralities. And in that resentment, they would try to drag the exceptional back down into mediocrity. Because the sight of someone living fully, authentically, joyfully without guilt, without permission is unbearable to those who have caged themselves. But for the few willing to take the risk, Nietzsche promised something extraordinary. Not happiness, not peace, not comfort, but something deeper. A life so fully lived, so fully owned, that you would choose it again. And again, and again. Forever. That's the secret philosophy. Not a doctrine. Not a theology, but a way of being that transforms you from a passive recipient of existence into its active creator. And it begins with a simple, terrifying question. If you had to live this life eternally, exactly as it is, would you? Most people spend their lives trying not to answer that question. They distract themselves. They numb themselves. They fill the hours with work, entertainment, obligation, noise and anything to avoid the silence where that question waits. Because the honest answer, for most, is no. No. They would not choose this life again. Not this job. Not this relationship. Not this quiet surrender to routines they never chose and values they never questioned. And admitting that means admitting something far worse. They are living a life they do unactually want, wearing a self they didn't design, following a script written by people who died centuries ago. Nietzsche understood this paralysis intimately. He wasn't writing from a place of detached academia. His philosophy emerged from profound personal suffering, chronic illness, social isolation, intellectual exile. He spent years in physical agony, migraines so severe he could barely see, nausea that left him bedridden for days. He had no audience, no recognition, no comfort of knowing his work mattered. And yet, in that crucible of pain and solitude, he arrived at a conclusion that defied everything his suffering should have taught him. He said yes to it, all of it. He embraced his life so completely that he wanted it back, unchanged, eternal. This is what separates Nietzsche's philosophy from nihilism. Nihilism says life is meaningless, so nothing matters. Nietzsche says, life is meaningless, so everything matters, because you are the one who gives it meaning. The absence of cosmic purpose isn't a tragedy. It's liberation. It's the discovery that you are not bound by destiny, not constrained by divine law, not limited by the moral frameworks others have tried to impose on you. You are free. Terrifyingly, exhilaratingly free. And that freedom demands something most people are unwilling to give. Responsibility. Responsibility without excuses. Responsibility without blame. Responsibility without the comfort of saying, this is how things are supposed to be. Nietzsche called this amor fatida. Love of fate, not passive acceptance, not resignation, but anaktivi, ferocious embrace of everything that happens to you, including the pain, the failure, the humiliation, because all of it is the raw material from which you sculpt yourself. All of it is necessary. Remove one element, and you are no longer you. Change one detail, and the entire architecture of your becoming collapses. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes almost unbearably demanding. It's not enough to accept your suffering. You must love it. You must see it as essential. You must recognize that your greatest strengths are forged in the furnace of your greatest weaknesses, that the parts of yourself you are most ashamed of might be the very things that make you irreplaceable. To think like a god is to see your life as a work of art, not a mistake to be corrected, not a problem to be solved, but a creation. But a creation to be completed with integrity, courage, and ruthless honesty. But here, that's the paradox. Most people do this because they don't know who they are. They've spent so long performing for others, meeting expectations, avoiding disapproval, that they've lost contact with their own desires. They know they're supposed to want success, security, recognition, but not what they actually want. And Nietzsche saw this as the deepest tragedy of modern life. People sleepwalking through existence, chasing goals they inherited, fearing judgments they never questioned, living as echoes of other people's voices. He called these people the herd, not as an insult, but as a description. Like animals that cluster together for safety, most humans derive their sense of reality from the group. They believe what the group believes. They value what the group values. They fear what the group fears. And in return, the group gives them comfort, belonging, the soothing lie that they are good people because they conform. But conformity, Nietzsche argued, is spiritual death. It's the slow erosion of everything singular, everything dangerous, everything truly alive in you. It's the price you pay for never being alone with your own thoughts. And this is what society demands. It doesn't want gods. It wants obedient workers, compliant citizens, people who color inside the lines, and never ask why the lines exist. It wants you to sacrifice your uniqueness for the comfort of sameness, to trade your potential for the security of mediocrity, and the mechanism it uses to enforce this is guilt. Guilt for wanting more. Guilt for being different. Guilt for not suffering enough, or suffering in the wrong way, or daring to enjoy life while others suffer. Guilt as a tool of control, embedded so deeply in the psyche that most people never recognize it as external. They think it's conscience. They think it's morality. But Nietzsche saw it as internalized slavery. To think like a god, you have to break that. You have to recognize that the voice in your head telling you you're selfish, arrogant, wrong, that voice isn't yours. It's an echo of the herd. The internalized judgment of 1,000 people who never questioned their own programming, and you have to silence it. Not through arrogance, not through cruelty, but through clarity. Through the calm recognition that you are not obligated to live according to values you want to believe in, moralities you never chose, purposes you never wanted. This doesn't mean rejecting all morality. It means creating your own. Nietzsche didn't advocate chaos. He advocated self-legislation, the ability to impose order on yourself, from yourself, for yourself, to decide what virtues you will cultivate, what principles you will honor, what kind of person you will become, not because a book told you, not because society approved, but because you chose it, consciously, deliberately, as an act of self. And this is where the philosophy becomes dangerous. Because if everyone did this, if everyone stopped outsourcing their values to authority and started creating their own society as we know it, would collapse. The illusion of shared meaning would shatter. The comfortable lies that hold civilization together would disintegrate, and people would be forced to confront the terrifying truth. We are alone. Each of us, alone. Alone with our choices. Alone with our responsibility. Alone with the question that never goes away. What will you do with this one? Wild, fleeting, irreplaceable existence. There's a moment in Nietzsche's work where the mask drops. It happens in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his most enigmatic book, when his prophet protagonist descends from the mountains after years of solitude and announces, God is dead. Not as a celebration, as a diagnosis, as a recognition that the foundation of Western civilization is a belief in a transcendent moral order. A divine lawgiver, a cosmic judge has collapsed, and humanity hasn't noticed yet. Or worse, it has noticed, but refuses to admit what this means. Because if God is dead, if the source of absolute truth is gone, then everything built on that foundation is suddenly unstable. Morality, justice, meaning purpose, all of it was scaffolding around a center that no longer exists. And Nietzsche saw people frantically trying to preserve the scaffolding while ignoring the absence at its core. They stopped believing in God, but kept acting as if Christian morality still applied. They abandoned religion, but clung to its values: compassion, equality, self-sacrifice, without realizing these values only made sense within a theological framework. Remove God, and why should the strong serve the weak? Why should suffering be noble? Why should you love your neighbor as yourself? Nietzsche wasn't endorsing cruelty. He was exposing incoherence. He was showing that modern, secular humanism is Christianity without Christ. A moral system running on fumes, sustained by habit rather than logic. And he predicted that when people finally recognized this incoherence, the result would be catastrophic. Not immediate, but inevitable. A slow descent into nihilism, into the recognition that nothing has intrinsic value, that all meaning is constructed, that existence is absurd, and most people, he believed, would not survive that recognition. they would collapse into despair, into cynicism, into what he called passive nihilism, denabelit. To care about anything because nothing ultimately matters. But Nietzsche also saw another possibility, a rare possibility. The possibility of active nihilism, recognition that nothing has inherent meaning, followed not by despair, but by exhilaration, by the realization that if nothing is sacred, everything can be created, that the absence of cosmic meaning is not a void but a canvas, that you are not discovering your purpose, but inventing it. And this invention, this act of self-creation, is the highest form of existence, not because it produces happiness, but because it produces greatness. This is where the Übermensch enters, not as a biological evolution, not as a political leader, but as a psychological achievement. The Übermensch is the human who no longer needs external validation, who no longer requires metaphysical comfort, who no longer seeks permission from gods or societies to exist. The Übermensch looks at the abyss of meaninglessness and doesn't flinch, doesn't retreat into comforting illusions. Instead, they step forward and declare, I will create meaning. I will impose order. I will become a law unto myself, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity, because the alternative is to remain a child, forever waiting for someone else to tell you what your life is for. And Nietzsche knew this was rare. He knew most people prefer slavery to sovereignty, prefer the comfort of being told what to believe over the burden of deciding for themselves, prefer the safety of collective identity over the isolation of individual truth, and he had no interest in converting them. His philosophy wasn't for the masses, it was for the few who already sensed something wrong, something missing, something unbearably false about the world they inherited, the ones who felt like exiles in their own lives, the ones who couldn't ignore the voice whispering, there must be more than this. But becoming the Übermensch requires more than intellectual assent. It requires what Nietzsche called the revaluation of all values, a complete dismantling and reconstruction of your moral framework. You have to examine every belief you hold, every principle you live by, and ask, did I choose this, or was it chosen for me? Is this true, or merely familiar? Does this elevate me, or diminish me? And then, with ruthless honesty, you have to discard everything that fails the test, everything that is secondhand, everything that is cowardice disguised as virtue, everything that is resentment disguised as justice. This process is agonizing. It feels like betrayal. It feels like abandoning your tribe, your family, your God. And, in a sense, it is you are severing the umbilical cord that connects you to collective meaning. You are stepping into exile, and there is no guarantee you will find anything on the other side. No guarantee that self-created values will feel as solid as inherited ones. No guarantee that freedom will be worth the loneliness it costs. Nietzsche offers no reassurance, only a challenge. Are you strong enough to endure your own sovereignty? This is why his philosophy terrifies people. It doesn't offer comfort. It offers a mirror, and in that mirror, most people see something they would rather avoid. Their own cowardice, their own conformity, their own refusal to take responsibility for the life they're living. Nietzsche doesn't judge this, he simply observes it, and he reserves his philosophy for those rare individuals who, upon seeing that reflection, don't turn away, who instead ask, how do I change? The answer is not a technique, not a practice, not a set of steps. The answer is a commitment to becoming who you are not, who you are told to be, not who you think you should be, but who you are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, fear. And Nietzsche believed that self is already there, waiting, not as a fixed essence, but as a potential that can only be realized through struggle, through suffering, through the relentless refusal to accept anything less than complete self. This is what it means to think like a god, not omnipotence, not omniscience, but creative sovereignty, the ability to look at chaos and impose form, to look at suffering and extract meaning, to look at existence in all its absurdity and cruelty and indifference, and say, yes, I want this. Choose this. I would live this life again, exactly as it is, forever. And the moment you can say that honestly, without delusion, without denial, have transcended the human condition, not by escaping it, but by embracing it so completely that you transform it. You become the artist of your own existence, the creator of your own values, the god of your own life. There's a final piece to Nietzsche's secret philosophy, and it's the one most people miss because it contradicts everything the philosophy seems to demand. After all, the talk of strength, self-overcoming, solitary greatness, Nietzsche ends with something unexpected. He ends with joy. Not the shallow happiness of comfort or distraction, but a deep, tragic joy that arises from loving life, despite everything, despite the suffering, despite the absurdity, despite the fact that nothing you build will last, that everyone you love will die, that the universe will forget you as if you never existed. This is the ultimate test. Not whether you can endure suffering. Anyone can endure. The question is whether you can transfigure it, whether you can look at the worst moments of your life, the betrayals, the failures, the losses, and recognize them as necessary, as the exact conditions required to forge you into who you became. And more than recognize them, love them. Love them so fiercely that if given the chance to erase them, you would refuse. Because without them, you would not be you. This is eternal recurrence at its deepest level, not a cosmological theory, but a psychological mirror. Nietzsche isn't asking whether the universe actually repeats. He's asking whether you are living a life worth repeating, whether you are making choices you can stand behind forever, whether you are becoming someone you would choose to be, again and again, without regret, without revision. And for most people, the answer is no. Not yet. Not because they're weak, but because they're asleep. Because they're drifting through existence on autopilot, repeating patterns they never questioned, pursuing goals they never chose, becoming smaller and smaller versions of themselves in exchange for safety, approval, belonging. They're trading their aliveness for the illusion of security. And the tragedy is, they don't realize it until it's too late, until they're on their deathbed, looking back at a life that feels like someone else's, wondering where the years went, wondering when they stopped being themselves. Nietzsche doesn't want that for you. His philosophy, for all its harshness, is an act of love, a refusal to let you sleepwalk, a refusal to let you settle, a refusal to let you waste your existence performing for people who will never understand you anyway. He's shaking you awake and saying, you have one life, one chance to become who you are, one opportunity to create something that justifies the absurdity of being, born into a universe that doesn't care whether you exist or not. What will you do with it? And the answer can't be borrowed, can't be inherited, can't be copied from someone else's playbook. The answer has to come from the deepest part of youth, the part that knows what you want before society told you what to want, the part that recognizes truth before fear distorts it, the part that is capable of greatness if you would only stop apologizing for it. This is the secret Nietzsche whispers between the lines of his philosophy. You are not broken. You are not incomplete. You are not waiting for permission. You are already everything you need to be. The only thing standing between you and the life you actually want is your willingness to claim it, to stop asking for approval, to stop seeking validation, to stop living as if someone else's judgment determines your worth. And yes, this is lonely. Yes, this is difficult. Yes, you will lose people who cannot follow you into that level of honesty. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is a life of quiet resentment, of unexpressed potential, of looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. The alternative is reaching the end and realizing you never lived. You performed. You conformed. You survived. But you never truly lived. Nietzsche's secret philosophy is not about becoming superhuman. It's about becoming human fully, authentically, courageously human. It is about shedding the layers of pretense and conditioning and fear until all that remains is the raw, undeniable truth of who you are, and then living from that place. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but with integrity, with intention, with a kind of aliveness that makes every moment feel significant. Even the painful ones, because they are yours. And if you can do that, if you can look at your life with all its flaws and failures and heartbreaks, and say, yes, I would choose this again, then you have done something extraordinary. You have thought like a god, not by transcending existence, but by embracing it, not by escaping suffering, but by transforming it into meaning, not by finding your purpose, but by creating it. This is the challenge Nietzsche leaves you with. Not a doctrine to believe, but a life to live. A life so fully yours, so deeply chosen, so courageously honest that it becomes a work of art. And the world needs that. Not another person following the script, but someone awake, someone alive, someone willing to be exactly who they are, without apology, without compromise, without the endless, exhausting performance of pretending to be someone else. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.